What's up, guys? This is Platypus Bob. We're picking up where we left off. I just picked up all the little items there are to get around Majula, and now we are headed off to the Forest of Fallen Giants. I'll probably pick up when I get to the bonfire there. So, from this bonfire, you have a bit of a long run, relatively, for this stage of the game before you get to the next one. There's a lot of enemies in the way, and your healing wares at this point are very limited. You should have whatever life gems you manage to save, because they're not reusable, and then you should have 2 Estus charges at this point. Wow, that arrow went right through my head. But you got some tricky encounters here, because they start you off with a lot of mixture of melee and ranged enemies, so you kind of have to be very attentive. If you have a shield at this point, it'll be a lot easier to kind of negate the effects of the ranged users, but unless you started with a shield, like if you picked a class that starts with a shield, you might not be able to get one at this point, so you need to be able to roll. That's why I said your starting class is important in the short term, but getting something like a shield can be done relatively soon. This is a tough encounter because you have a archer out of range and 2 or 3 enemies down here to deal with. If you stay under the archer, he can't get to you, so it's best just to lure these guys over here, take them out. Also, if you stray too close to the fog gate, if you're just trying to run through here, this guy gets up, tries to ambush you. At this point, I would recommend leaving this guy alone, because he'll kick your ass, but he's also pretty cool. I mean, he's friendly enough, so why try to hurt him? Up here, there's a couple guys waiting around this corner. It's pretty tight, so be careful. If you are using a weapon that has like a really wide swing, you might start to hit against the walls, and that can cause problems. Alright, up here is where you will eventually be able to kill this archer, but be careful because he'll be shooting at you on the approach. Take him out, and then a quick little jump over here to pick up short sword, which is what I decided I will be using for the time being. Which apparently I don't have enough dex to use it right now. See, I knew that I need to level it eventually, but I picked the short sword because I like its moveset. Even though its damage at this point isn't incredible, I think the most important factor to consider when you're picking a weapon is the moveset. I mean, you're gonna want something that feels right when you are using it. If something could be statistically superior, but if it just doesn't feel comfortable, it's not going to be of much value to you. Also, if you're unfamiliar with the moveset, then you could get stuck in a situation where you don't know what attacks you're going to be doing, and it's a good way to get yourself killed. Alright, I'm going to rest up before we move forward. Alright, so I just rested up and I scurried on back to Majula to level up. I just put 1 point into Dex, and now I can use the short sword. It's got a nice slashing attack, but also I really like that it's one-handed. R2 attack is a thrust. Diversity in a moveset, I think, is important. So I like having a slash mixed with a thrust. But now that I rested here, I have to go through all these guys again, so I'll meet up with you back back near that fog gate. Alright, took care of all those guys, heal up, move through here, and this is pretty much the last little hallway before the next bonfire. So, in the end, it's really not that far, but this early on, it's a lot of enemies, and don't have a ton of healing items. So another very important thing to consider when you're picking a weapon is its stat scaling, which is different from the stat requirements. Like this weapon I needed 10 dexterity to use, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it scales with dexterity. This one does. It's got C scaling with strength and C scaling with dexterity, which is moderate, but that means that, that means that it will get bonus damage in addition to the damage listed based off of what your stats are. So you could have a real big weapon that looks like it takes, you know, a lot of muscles to use, but if it only scales with dexterity, you're only going to be improving its damage by leveling up that stat, which is interesting to consider. I just walked right into that. It's also important to note that there's really no correlation between stat requirements and your stat scaling. Like for example, I've decided what weapon I'd like to use for the majority of this run. I won't get it until a bit later, but to wield the weapon, I have to have a certain amount of strength, but the majority of the weapon's damage is going to come from dex, which puts me in a situation where I'm going to have to level both of them up a lot. So these are all things to consider when deciding what weapon you're going to use and then how to level up your character accordingly. So I just ran up these stairs that are at the bonfire and picked up a small shield, and thought that just going through the next area I'd talk briefly about whether or not you want to use a shield and what to consider. So a shield, when you're deciding whether you want to use a shield, you pretty much have to ask yourself, do I want to be a noob or do I want to be a pro? But I'm just kidding. There's nothing wrong with using a shield. You just have to ask yourself, do I want to be trying to tank hits and then deal damage back to the enemy, or do I want to be avoiding all damage? And those aren't even mutually exclusive play styles. Shield will give you security when you're fighting against a lot of smaller enemies, but it's also very important to understand your limits. You know, some enemies will be able to break through your shield's stability, so you have to look at that. Also, some shields aren't going to offer 100% physical protection, like I don't think this one does. You'll see that as I block things, I'll still be taking damage. You also need to consider that if you're using a shield, you're using up your left hand more or less, and it could always be used for something else. So you see a lot of people that use shields or equip shields, but rarely use them. So I think maybe a better use of that slot to two-hand your weapon and do more damage, or to dual wield a weapon, or just to actually use the shield, because there's no point of having it here if you're just not going to use it. For now, I don't think I'm going to use a shield, just because I don't like this one. There's ones I like later, but also I don't feel a particularly strong need for one at this point. It definitely is a good thing to have. It makes you feel safer, but against earlier on enemies, might not be totally necessary. This bit isn't as bad as it looks. This guy's going to be spitting fireballs. You have to time it. You have to get ambushed. Forgot about that. Oh no. Crisis averted. Yeah, see, I've got a shield in my hand, but I'm still just rolling through all these guys because I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, and I'm not used to using a shield. So wait for him to shoot his fireball, and you get to this door real quick, and then you get inside at the last second. And in this chest is a good weapon for early on. It is the fire longsword, which it's not exactly like a unique weapon. It's just a regular longsword with a fire infusion. I'll explain what that means at a later date, talking about weapon customization. But it's like a longsword, but instead of scaling with stats like strength and dex like it normally would, it takes that scaling down a little but adds fire damage. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. But if you're using a character that's not going to be pumping a lot of stats into strength or dex, it might be useful to use that for a little bit of extra damage. The final thing we're going to want to do before we progress from this bonfire is talk to the first NPC we've met, Melentia. She sells a few weapons which can be useful at this point. The club is particularly good early on because it scales very well with strength. So if you just put stats into strength, the club is going to be doing much more damage than anything else. But what she also sells is something that's pretty much necessary to buy that I actually already bought off screen, which is the key to the blacksmith's house. If you don't do this, you're not going to be able to upgrade your weapons. Once you've unlocked the door at this house for the blacksmith, you can go in and he will offer to reinforce your weapons for you. You do this using Titanite shards, which is the standard upgrade equipment. Upgrading your weapon is the main way to increase your damage output. It's much more efficient than increasing stats. So I would highly recommend doing this as early as possible. But the issue is there's a fairly limited supply of upgrade equipment, so you have to be smart with how you use them. So hopefully you can take the information I told you about weapons in this video to find a weapon you like and upgrade it. Thanks for watching, and next time we will progress farther down into the forest.